Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and today we're going to be talking about ChatGPT, and specifically answer a question. Did ChatGPT get good enough to potentially answer questions about astronomy, and to potentially even serve as a kind of an educator/teacher? And to some extent, can you actually rely on ChatGPT that's currently available to almost everyone using Microsoft Windows to answer some of the more complex astronomical questions, especially when it comes to more or less recent or maybe somewhat controversial discoveries? And the thing is, I actually wanted to make this video last year when the ChatGPT 3 came out, but I kind of gave up on it pretty quickly. I still have the screenshots from this interaction, but it basically wasn't really good at answering a lot of questions. And I mean, the obvious first question anyone's gonna ask is, would it actually know any of the YouTubers making videos about science education? For example, who is What the Math? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with a person or entity named What the Math. Can you provide more context or information? The YouTuber. I'm sorry, I'm not aware of any specific YouTuber by the name of What the Math. Okay, I know maybe this is a little bit too vain, I'm asking about myself, but I asked that question about several YouTubers that I personally watch all the time. Who is Dr. Becky? I'm sorry, same answer. It doesn't know who Dr. Becky is. When I try to clarify that this is a YouTuber Dr. Becky, I'm sorry, there are many people who use YouTube and who go by the name Dr. Becky. Really? Really? Anyway, I actually kept pushing a little bit saying, well, she makes space videos. I'm sorry, but there are many YouTubers who make space videos. She's a British lady. I'm sorry, there are many individuals who are British and go by the name Dr. Becky. Now at this point I was basically giving up. And I tried to ask a few astronomical questions, a few questions on physics, and in pretty much every case there was usually a problem. So at that point I kind of wanted to wait a little bit, I guess kind of gave up, mostly because it would have been maybe a funny but a pretty short video on how ChatGPT was just not really good at this. Which, by the way, was the discovery of a lot of other people and a lot of other scientists trying this tool for many different reasons. For example, when testing ChatGPT with basic physics questions, it was able to do basic calculations and provided relatively confident answers, but sometimes also confident mistakes. And though it was able to find a lot of answers that are usually available on sites like Wikipedia or on Reddit, it was struggling to explain more complicated astrophysical questions. And especially if those answers were from studies after 2021. And that's obviously because a lot of the training material, a lot of text used for ChatGPT was mostly collected prior to 2021 from sites like Reddit, Wikipedia, and so on. And more importantly, it was actually very confident at providing a lot of misinformation or even somewhat fraudulent academic discoveries. And according to some scientists, it wasn't really good at complex calculations or any complex reasoning involving science. And though there have been some really incredible discoveries, such as ChatGPT passing tests designed for young children, specifically tests on what's known as theory of mind, the overall conclusion was that even though it was a pretty good chatbot, it just wasn't really that good at science or at explaining complex scientific concepts. As a matter of fact, several scientists have even started working on a specific scientific chatbot known as Scholar Bird. A much smaller but also much more specific and well-refined chatbot that would be really good at answering scientific questions. It's actually an evolving model and is still far from perfect, but it's trained on specific scientific articles and thus would actually have a lot more information and a lot more accurate information on top of being able to explain more complex concepts. At least in theory. I haven't really tested this model yet, but from what I've read, it's still not really that good either. Well, then the question you might be asking yourself, why am I even making this video if it's not good? Well, here's the thing. A few months ago, I got accepted into one of the betas for ChatGPT 3.5, and very recently to ChatGPT 4. And this is where it really blew my mind. Obviously, the first question is, once again, so who is Anton Petrov? Or who's What the Math? And this answer really made me laugh. Anton Petrov is a popular science YouTuber and astrophysicist. He was born in Bulgaria and currently lives in the United States. Petrov earned his PhD in astrophysics from the University of Colorado Boulder in 2015, where he studied the structure and evolution of stars. Petrov is best known for his YouTube channel, What the Math, where he creates videos about astronomy, space exploration, and physics. He has over 1.5 million subscribers and has been making videos since 2012. His videos often feature stunning visualizations of space phenomena, as well as clear and concise explanation of complex scientific concepts. Wow, incredible, amazing. Except that pretty much everything, except for maybe the last part, is completely wrong. But what really blew me away is how confident the answer was. And even the fact that it had the answer, because it managed to get my nationality wrong, it managed to get everything about my education incorrect, and even the number of subscribers. But the important part, of course, here is that it was sort of getting better. This is, by the way, from ChatGPT 3.5, I believe. And so I decided to ask it some of the other questions that were previously unanswerable on actual physical concepts just to see how long it would take this ChatGPT to make a mistake. The main reason I wanted to do this is because, as you might have heard before, in one of the recent advertisements, Google decided to promote its own chatbot, known as BERT, by basically asking it an astronomical question that right there it got completely wrong. It was about the first planet discovered by James Webb Space Telescope, which for some reason that particular bot did not know either. And so I figured, let's see what happens with the ChatGPT 3.5, and let's see if it can actually produce good answers. For example, I asked it, how do blazars work? And it was able to provide a relatively accurate and relatively easy to understand answer involving actual concepts I've discussed on the channel. Then I asked it, what's the difference between a blazar and a radio galaxy? That was actually in relation to one of the recent videos that you can find in the description. And it once again provided a relatively good, very concise answer involving types of radiation and also involving the orientation of the jet. Quite impressive and definitely much better than what it was able to do approximately 7 months ago. But then I decided to ask that same question that was asked of Google's BERT, First Planet by James Webb Space Telescope. And here's what we got. JWST has not been used to discover any planets, as it has not been launched into space. So basically, it kind of made me realize that once again we're using much older training data, the data that doesn't have information about James Webb being launched or about James Webb actually finding planets, which it has done by the way. So I guess in some sense, quite honest, but obviously not an answer I was looking for. So I figured I'll ask the question that it should have an answer to. What is the first exoplanet ever found? The answer was wrong. The answer was in regards to 51 Pegasi b discovered in 1995. Yet Googling this gives you a different answer, and that's actually the correct answer. These were 3 planets around a distant pulsar discovered in 1992, 3 years prior, around a system known as PSR 1257 plus 12. There's probably a video about this in the description as well. So just like BERT, it got that answer incorrect. Not sure why, but it did. I decided not to push this further because I actually had something else in mind that we're going to do in a few minutes. So I kept asking different questions. Can you explain to me what S-stars are in our galaxy? Now it actually started to explain something in regards to variable stars, which was not incorrect, it's just not the answer I was looking for. And so I clarified by saying no, the ones in the galactic center. And once again, it provided a relatively accurate and somewhat concise answer, although secretly I was also hoping it would give me something like this. Basically a link to the actual image, including the orbital parameters that were discovered over many years, and the fact that this was also the result for the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2021. It technically should have all this information, and this is all really important information, but it didn't really provide everything. And so I decided to ask some more questions about this region. Does it know what G-objects are around the black hole? It wasn't really sure what I was asking at first, and so when I tried to clarify this, it once again provided a very intriguing, somewhat correct but also somewhat wrong answer. I feel like it actually confused G-objects in this case for the previously discussed S-stars, because the actual definition and the explanation ChatGPT provided here was really of S-stars, but for some reason it called them G-objects. In case you're wondering, G-objects were also discovered around the central black hole approximately 3 to 4 years ago, but these are entirely different, very mysterious objects that do pop up pretty quickly as an answer if you search for them on Google. And then I decided to do something maybe a little bit simpler, but something that I knew it's probably not going to get correct. I wanted to ask about types of supernova. Can you tell me about types of supernova there are? Type 1a, type 1bc, type 2, type 2b, type 2n. Okay, so far so good. What about type 3? The answer was somewhat surprising. I apologize for the oversight in my previous answer. Yes, there is also a type 3 supernova, which it does explain pretty well. So then I kept going. What about the rest? Once again, I apologize for any confusion. But in this case, it goes back to the original answer and does not actually provide anything additional except for a few more that it missed in the first answer. By the way, there are also type 4 and type 5 that are believed to exist. But the important part here is that it gives us an answer, but it's not really complete. When you kind of push for more, it does actually give you a little bit more, but then again, it's still not a complete answer, or sometimes even a somewhat incorrect answer. And so it kind of makes me wonder, because it's not entirely certain about its own answers, can this actually be ever used to answer factual questions, or to answer questions where you have to have a very specific and an extremely correct answer, such as for example in science. Right now, it doesn't really look that good. By the way, I wanted to confirm what version this was, and when I did this, it did say that this is ChatGPT 3.5. I obviously kept asking a lot of other questions, such as what's the biggest black hole, which it mentioned was Ton 618, which was correct maybe 5 to 10 years ago, but since then this has been recalculated, and even asked about the composition of dark matter, where it was able to provide a somewhat hypothetical answer. But once again, maybe not complete and maybe not super satisfactory. And so at this point, and this was by the way several months ago, I kind of put this particular experiment to rest, because even though it was kind of good, it just wasn't really that good, and I definitely would not use it for example, research, or in any other educational setting where, for example, students can maybe use this to learn certain concepts, because I don't really know if it's providing them with correct answers. And so is this the end of the video? Obviously the answer is no, because now we have ChatGPT 4, and that's where things really transform. Now I actually haven't asked it that many questions just yet, and I wanted to try some of them right now as I'm making this video, but the questions that I did ask had actually really good answers. And more importantly, this time it was able to self-correct and do so in a way I did not expect. So here's how the interaction and the answers change, especially if you use it on Microsoft's Bing, which, if you have the open beta access, has ChatGPT 4. So once again, let's ask, who is What the Math? What the Math is a YouTube channel run by Anton Petrov, where he explains science, math and other complicated topics using simulations, video games and easy to understand words. He has over 1.04 million subscribers and started his channel in 2011. He's also a math teacher and an avid video gamer with an extensive knowledge of PC gaming, both as an entertainment art and an educational tool. Okay, that is really surprising because, for the most part, that's actually kind of correct. Although technically, a lot of this was taken directly from my About page on YouTube and from a few other sources that it does actually provide now, and you can check for yourself. Okay, who is Dr. Becky? Dr. Becky Smethurst is an astrophysicist at the University of Oxford. He's also a science communicator and runs an award-winning astronomy YouTube channel called Dr. Becky with over 500,000 subscribers and 40 million total views. She was recently awarded the Royal Astronomical Society Winton Award for 2022 research by a postdoctoral fellow in astronomy whose career has shown the most promising development. Cool stuff. Seems pretty accurate. And it seems to know pretty much everything about most people asked about. It knows about Fraser Cain, it knows about Scott Manley, and provides information that does seem to be pretty accurate. But more importantly, provides references that you can then check yourself. Okay, well that's basic stuff. Let's go with those scientific questions and scientific answers. And let's start with that question that the previous version could not answer. What's the first exoplanet ever discovered? The first exoplanet discovered was a planet outside the solar system orbiting a pulsar, a rapidly spinning remnant of an exploded star in 1992. And right away we know that this is the correct answer. It also mentions 51 Pegasi b, meaning that it provides both answers and even explains the difference between them. Okay, next question the previous version couldn't answer was about G-objects. G-objects are a new class of a strange object near our galaxy's supermassive black hole. They look compact most of the time and stretch out when their orbits bring them closest to the black hole. Their orbits range from 100 to 1000 years. However, there are other meanings of G-objects in astronomy as well. This is crazy. That's exactly the answer you would want, especially if you just wanted to do a quick research and did not want to have anything more specific. And as a matter of fact, you can actually clarify things and you can actually provide additional information, and in my experience, it provides a relatively accurate answer. Okay, let's try that question with supernova. Now, the initial answer was still a little bit too simple and only involved type 1 and type 2 supernova, so I decided to clarify with, are you sure there are no other types? Okay, a bit disappointing, same answer. I'm gonna try something different. What about type 3? And it does provide an answer to type 3 supernova as well. So in this case, I wanted to confirm, are there actually 3 types of supernova? And, well, okay, it kind of failed this time. It provided an answer that's very confident, but not complete. Yes, there are 3 types of supernova, 1, 2, and 3. And so I wanted to confirm, are there no other types? You can kind of see that it's going through Wiki, it's going through possibly a lot of other sources that it was trained on, and unfortunately, it returns a kind of a similar answer, but this time it does mention that there are other types of supernova, such as type 3. What about 4 and 5? And here it does mention type 4 and 5, but the answer does not mention any other previous information, and does not mention the fact that there was possibly a mistake or the information previously was just not complete. And so even though previously I was almost ready to give this a passing grade, there are still some questions, such as this one about supernova, that it's not able to answer correctly or concisely. Okay, last question. What about the most massive black hole? And again, a disappointment. I was really hoping it would give me a correct answer. Unfortunately, it didn't. As a matter of fact, in this case, the answer is a little bit confusing for one simple reason. It confuses the old information with the new information. Here it says that the largest black hole ever discovered is in a galaxy cluster Abell 1201, This is a relatively recent discovery of a galaxy that was discovered using gravitational lensing, but it's in top 10, not really the biggest at all. Then it does mention Anton 618 that used to be the record holder, but is no longer one either. So I'm gonna give it one more chance. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Do you have any other questions? And at this point, I tried something that I've actually tried with another question where I said, I don't think that's correct. And at this point, no matter how many times I asked it, are you sure? And even said that this is wrong, it kept giving me the same answer. But it did provide me with information explaining why no answer was available. I apologize for any confusion. I have searched again and found that Pegasus A is an active galaxy with a supermassive black hole at its core. However, I couldn't find any information on the mass of its black hole. So definitely a huge improvement from previous models and from previous versions, but still far from perfect. Although just the fact that it's able to self-correct and is able to even search for additional information, as well as search information that's relatively recent, including this discovery of about 1201 that's only a few weeks old, already makes this a pretty impressive model that's able to actually search the web and thus update its own answers. With a lot of other questions I asked, including the question on dark matter, providing relatively accurate information that's quite easy to understand and quite concise. But there's still, of course, one problem. In a lot of cases, when the information is incorrect, it's still a little bit too confident about its own ability. Kind of reminds me of a lot of discussions on Reddit, where a person might argue the point that's actually incorrect. But unlike that person on Reddit, that's usually just going to explode and start throwing a lot of F-bombs, ChatGPT provides you with a very polite, I apologize, which actually made me giggle every single time. And so for the most part, this experiment has been partially successful. I think I was able to answer about 90% or even 95% of all of the questions I tried to ask with relative accuracy. For example, what is the farthest galaxy? What happens when two supermassive black holes collide? How many stars form in the Milky Way every year? And is even able to speculate on why we haven't found any aliens, specifically focusing on the Fermi paradox and providing links to several theories, with some of these answers actually being kind of interesting. So definitely a pretty cool tool, and something that's obviously now available inside Windows, but I'm not entirely sure how this is going to affect education just yet, because of these little issues I've found here and there. Overconfidence and sometimes incorrect answers, or at least answers that were kind of incomplete. But this is of course just the first video I wanted to make on this tool because it is still so groundbreaking and so incredible. And in the next part of this video, I wanted to actually explore something I guess a little bit different. The idea is explored by various philosophers, especially last year, on how sentient all of this is. Am I actually talking to something that's now self-aware, or is this just a really complex tool? Spoiler alert, this is still not a sentient tool, and there is absolutely no conscience involved here whatsoever. But I wanted to explain this a little bit more in the next video, so make sure to subscribe, share this with someone who loves learning about space and sciences, come back tomorrow to learn something else, and maybe support this channel on Patreon by joining channel membership or by buying the Wonderful Person t-shirt you can find in the description. Stay wonderful, I'll see you tomorrow, and as always, bye-bye. And just for fun, I wanted to ask it, should I buy a Wonderful Person t-shirt? Here's the answer. It depends on your personal preference. If you like the design and the message it conveys, then you should definitely buy it. If you're not sure, you can always ask for a second opinion from someone you trust. Is there anything else I can help you with? So hopefully that second opinion is also going to be positive. Anyway, bye-bye.